to the Rise World Summit 2022. It may be the first one for many of you, and some of you have been there before, but we certainly hope it's not your last. The Rise World Summit is a place that we say people come to sharpen their saw and revive their spirits because of the type of interactive activities that we have created, where every single one of them have been curated to ensure maximum engagement as well as conversations deeper and deeper for outcomes that you can take further. And because of that, of course, we also say that, it is about conferences, unconferences, and then there's Rise. Because in 100 hours of programming across 3 days, we don't have a single panel or a single presentation. Everyone here is a participant. Everyone here is a speaker. So theme this year is innovation and diversity. And even though we are coming to the end, we still would like everyone to kind of think about it a bit, because we all talk about D&I as an agenda, which is very important. But honestly, it's about compliance. And that's where we want to change that mindset to say that if instead of talking of inclusion and linking it with diversity as a checklist, what if we use diversity as a part of our driver for innovation and growth? I think it'll change the way we look at diversity and definitely change the way we design our programs. And so with that, I'm going to, kind of invite Tarun Singhal to please start the proceedings of this roundtable. He's the director, BD and Marcom, Sopara Stereo and Sopra Banking Software India, and the vice president of Chevening Alumni India. Tarun, over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Namaskar, Suprabhat, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on which time zone you have joined in globally today. I'm Tarun Singhal and welcome you all at this such an important occasion of Basant Panchami and Saraswati Puja. Wishing you and your families best of health and success. As we all know, India is a country full of heritage, culture, and colors. And here, we all call our Chevening and British scholars as rising and guiding living bridge stars of India. Chevening scholarships are awarded to outstanding professionals from all over the world to pursue a one-year master's degree in any subject at any UK university. Chevening Alumni India was formed in 2015 with an objective of bringing together the Chevening alumni in the country. Today, we have over 3,500 and still growing Cheveners amongst us. This makes us one of the largest alumni globally of Cheveners in a country. As an evolving association, we also aim to contribute to the betterment of the society with focus on trade, culture, sustainability, mental well-being, cyber wellness, and corporate social responsibility. The Rise World Summit #RWS22, one of a kind, co-created and co-located convening of thought leaders, experts, and learners that influence action and outcomes on the SDGs for the year ahead. It's a unique platform that is unconventional, global, meaningful, engaging, and much more. As Chevening Alumni India, we are honored and delighted to be a strategic partner with Rise to help the common goal and involvement as a thought leader in the field of SDGs and sustainability. Very quickly on the topic, the applications of digital technologies that provide both a granular and system level view of sustainability issues continue to gain momentum. For example, farmers download apps to just adjust planting and harvesting cycles, conserve precious water supplies, and compare crop prices in the marketplace. Digital devices adjust heating and cooling within buildings to reduce pollution and save money. Who could have envisioned that electric cars would disrupt the automotive industry so quickly, or that Burger King would sell its iconic Whopper alongside the plant-based Impossible Burger? Such evidence of sustainability disruption is everywhere. Not only this, sustainable innovation is creating new products that can be produced with fewer carbon emissions, less waste, and an emphasis on enhancing wellness. A big leap forward through digital technology is vitally important to avoiding the worst outcomes of accelerating climate change and other measures of an increasingly compromised planet. Sopra Steria, where I work, is a major player in the fight against climate change and is recognized as a very advanced company in this field. Without further ado, let me now hand over it back to Karen to help introduce the moderator for our much awaited roundtable session on prioritizing SDGs and exploring linkages with main focus on innovation. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Tarun. And yes, I just want to very quickly, before we get started with the actual roundtable and discussion, is to explain the flow and some of the other guidelines that we kind of go through. So very quickly, number one is, as you can see, we do have two parts to the whole this thing. This is not a webinar, so don't think of it as a webinar, but this is a place where thought leaders, experts, and learners come together. And therefore, the way we do it when there are larger numbers, and some of you may have done this in the physical world, is you have an inner circle and then an outer circle. Unfortunately, the technology doesn't allow us to change the terminology, but for us, in all purposes, it is the inner circle and the outer circle, right? And we would encourage people to use the facilities that are available to us. So number one is the Q&A. Put in the questions. There are experts who are sitting over here who can give you those answers. So use that. And I would, of course, urge the experts to please put in your comments. And just because someone has answered once does not mean you can't answer it again. Multiple perspectives is really what we are looking for in these conversations. Second is, of course, the chat box. Please do put all your information over there. In fact, to begin with, as we say, many people tell us 2 hours, it's too long. People cannot stay. They're so webinared out, Believe me, every single roundtable has gone over time. And that's only because we have put a cap on 10 to 15 minutes. Otherwise, I think easily we could go beyond half an hour, if not an hour, right? So please, I would encourage everybody, please put your introductions in the chat box, because we don't spend time on that. We want to make sure that every moment that we are here in this roundtable is used really effectively to talk and have deeper conversation and dialogues. So use it and put your introductions over there. Put all your comments, keep it going, keep it active. Where else will you ever get a channel where you can actually have multiple conversations going? Because in the physical world, you would be told, shh, 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 right? There's no shushing over here. There is just conversations and flow of dialogue. So do use it very effectively, have parallel conversations, but be mindful of each other's as well. Last but not the least, I want to say that, the flow that we do, and of course the topic Mrinal will be introducing, but the way we want people to think about the conversation is, because we're looking at outcomes, is to think of challenges, capabilities, and then collaboration. Because we believe it's only when we address the challenges first and keep that at the center of all the conversation are we ever going to move towards solutions and innovations that we can then take up, hopefully, after this event. Because it's not about the summit alone, it's about what will happen after it as well. And these conversations, we hope, will continue post this event. So over to you, Mrinal, and we're looking forward to taking this further and moderating this session. Mrinal Mathur is an architect, environmental professional, and has worked in sustainability, water, and energy space in India abroad. And she has worked extensively in the SDG space. And I think that's really the reason why, Mrinal, it's over to you to take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks a lot. Already, I think the topic has been, and the the administrative issues have been quite well explained by Tarun and Karen. So I will not dwell very deeply into it, but I will give you a very brief background about why we started this topic, why we're holding this roundtable on interlinkages, innovation, and diversity for SDG implementation. One of the key reasons is that 17 SDGs adopted by the 127 countries in 2016 have already come into being, and it cover the gamut of environmental, social, and economic concerns around the world. But many of the targets of the goals actually were supposed to be met by 2020, particularly, say, the water targets or life underwater. And therefore, there is a certain urgency to meet targets, and it cannot be overstated. And 2030 is a deadline which is not very far away. So Chevening Alumni India and the RISE Summit came together, and they discussed how this can be accelerated. And one of the ways we felt that acceleration to meet SDGs can be achieved through developing further interlinkages, creating innovation in not just technology, but also perhaps thinking, and also bringing in diverse groups together to help UN bodies and governments implement. So this is the background around it. What I will do is I'll give you a very quick background and interlinkages, and expect the panelists to come forth and start the discussion. We realize that SDGs are vast. However, when we look at the 17 goals and look at the targets under it, as well as the indicators, studying them help us understand the interconnections between them. Till now, discussions around interconnections have been a little behind, or have taken a little bit of a backseat. And exploring and documenting co-benefits we feel can meet the targets by desired timelines. For example, we could have a project on sustainable consumption and production, which is goal 12, which may well directly link with goal on cities. So national strategy to implement these and measure co-benefits should be reviewed, since what gets measured gets implemented. While monitoring of projects and SDG goals are a national activity, at times assessment of impacts between SDGs can get overlooked. A discussion on how to navigate this complex activity is what we will have today within government, within academia, and with UN agencies as well. So now I call on Karen herself, Ajit, and Sapna, who are all three Cheveners and alumni and Chevening alumni, to please come and deliberate on this. One of the questions that I'll put forth to these three main panelists is, how can co-benefits be achieved and measured using an approach, and what approach should be used, where interlinkages are recognized between SDGs and measured?
Ajit or Sapna, over to you first. I think I'll wait my turn.
Right, so let me go first then. Sure. I'm from the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor. And so our role is largely to work with the scientific communities, technologists and innovators, largely the researchers and the innovators in the nation. So the whole focus is, of course, to ensure that we get the most effective technology and the innovation, etc., on the ground, but also to look at how these are aligning to the SDGs per se, and what are our goals and how do we meet them. Of course, it needs to be done collaboratively. So we work with the industry, we work with the MSMEs, startups, as well as the institutes per se, the academic institutes. So this is the kind of ecosystem that we work with. And then we also have industry, funding most of this work, global foundations, Indian foundations, and countries outside of India. So that's my focus areas. Of course, Government of India and their line ministries also work on these areas. However, I'm going to be limiting myself to, just my division, which is called the Strategic Alliances Division. So when you look at, for instance, SDG 1, which is mostly on livelihood, skill development, etc., you can link it up with, something like, clean energy or clean water and so on. So for instance, you have something called the Center of Excellence for Renewable Energy. Just to take that example to explain this collaboration that happens and the linkages between SDGs. So a center of excellence of that nature largely has innovations as well as incubation of startups on areas which are related to renewable energy. Now, the same thing when it comes to the ground, the youth can be, skilled, and the livelihoods of the youth, of the rural youth for that matter, could be enhanced so that these renewable energy solutions go to the, rural areas per se. So which means that not only the startups, who are innovating and manufacturing these, the youth also gets livelihood. So the SDG 1 as well as the SDG 7 per se get, interlinked. Similarly, you have something called the clean water and sanitation, which is SDG 6. So there's a project called the Chilka Lake Rejuvenation Project in Bhubaneswar, where we are trying to focus on how do we, silk the lake, we rejuvenate it and so on. And at the same time, provide livelihoods, because once it is rejuvenated, there is a lot of scope of livelihood. So again, a mix of SDG 1 and SDG 6 and so on. So we have linkages there, and we have collaborations where industry funds this kind of a project, adopts the lakes, adopts some of the villages where these lakes are prominent, and also ensures the desilting, links it with an MG Narega, which is again a government scheme, and then finally ensures sustainability and livelihood for the rural space. So both linkages as well as collaborations take place in such a manner. And similarly, we have several other 300 plus projects that we have undertaken so far, which almost all of them have some mix of SDG goals. But however, there would be a prominent SDG goal which we are trying to achieve. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sapna. I think you gave different examples which capture what's happening across India. I mean, you're in a key position to understand what are the vast projects which are happening. I am Dr. Ajitchandran. I've been working in the area of sustainable development with communities for over 2 to 3 decades. And in the last few years, I've been working with corporates. So, I want to take it one step back before we talk about linkages. Last year, we were working closely with few corporates as part of a UN Global Compact program, where we were trying to mainstream SDGs in their core activities. Now, one of the things is, and we know many of us may be aware about different SDGs and all other the indicators or the targets which we need to meet, but quite a few of them who are the key stakeholders have no clue about the different SDGs itself. So, we have a long way to go right from there to make the understanding of what are these SDGs. So many companies, and I'm sure NGOs and others, we don't normally take it upon ourselves to understand it in the holistic way. We certainly do something in it, some parts of it, and then connect it. So this is a kind of let's say, as and when things happen, you do something, that kind of thing, rather than a planned approach. So I would say we really require, before these interlinkages to happen, for entities involved in this to go and have a reasonable understanding. I don't say thorough understanding, reasonable understanding of all these SDGs, and then identify where they fit in. So that's a thing which we found with most corporates, that you need to scan it, and it's not an easy thing. And people think it's you can just go through the SDGs and maybe no, it doesn't happen that way, because consciously many of these SDGs may seem remote and something which you're not working at or not impacting, but that's not the case. And that's where this interlinkages come in. You see, as an example with corporates, many of them have CSR activities working on health and drinking water and many things around their companies and in the villages nearby. But these are not connected to, these are, let's say, in silos. They go there, they find that this is needed for the community and they do it. But they don't connect that the health problem might be a reason which is due to certain pollution which they or some other companies have created. So the core reason does not get addressed. You address the symptoms. We do need to address symptoms when it comes to health. We need to take people to and make sure that there are facilities for them. But in the long term, unless you address the core reasons, you're not able to find solutions for those existing in other SDGs. Why I'm saying this is, as a larger planner, when we allocate money or you allocate your time and resources, you need to see both. You need to address the core, the reasons which cause impact on other SDGs. At the same time, you need to, for the short term, maybe work on those other SDGs as well. So health and pollution is a very, everybody understands. With pollution, it creates problems in health. But we address the health definitely, but the pollution part generally gets sidelined. We do need to address both. And let's be very clear. SDGs are a tool for us to kind of categorize and understand it, so that we are able to measure it. Have some, as she said, unless you measure things, you don't know how you're going to progress. And we need to have these measurements in place. And many of these SDGs are connected very well with quite a lot of other SDGs, and some of them are not. So it also has got its own patterns and things like SDG. Some of the overlapping SDGs are there in everything. Like SDG 12, I mean, it's connected with almost 14 other SDGs. So my take is, without complicating it, anybody who is working in this field within their sphere of action have a better understanding of these SDGs first, and then as they look at these SDGs, see which one is the causal factor, or which one is the root cause which is causing this the interlinkages to happen. Then address both, but make sure that at least the issues which are in the core area are addressed. Definitely. I'll stop here, and I'd like to invite Smitha at a later point on this, because Smitha is working with a company which is looking at helping corporates do this, and she's looking at all helping the companies look at all these SDGs. So I would like to know her experience as well. Yeah, I'll stop here.
Yeah, thanks, Sapna and Ajit. I think, it's so true. I think what Ajit said, we need to make it simple, right? But at the same time, as Sapna said, we need to measure it. And I think where the SDGs are concerned, I truly believe that it is a landscape that covers every single pressing problem that we face in the world. And just like the world is interconnected, so are the SDGs. Unfortunately, or depends on how you want to look at it, you see the SDGs as 17 blocks, right? And therefore, we work in 17 silos. Now, laser focus is really important, no doubt about it. And I admire people with laser focus, but I'm not one of them. I like to see the bigger picture. I want to see the interlinkages. I want to connect the dots, right? And I feel that is something that we need to talk about more. And I agree exactly with what Ajit said, that people don't even know the SDGs. Unfortunately, we go by the literal meaning of the words of the SDGs. But the truth is that if we want to achieve the SDGs, what it stands for, we need to understand the target and indicators. Of course, this is not a conversation to get into the technical aspects of it, but suffice to say that unless we actually put some, kind of focus on that understanding, on the interlinkages, you're not going to be able to achieve even that SDG. That's the sad part of it, right? That you're not even going to achieve the single SDG that you are focused on unless you take into consideration the entire ecosystem around it and the multi-sectoral issues that will affect it. I mean, one very simple thing which I always use, the simplest is livelihood. I mean, if somebody doesn't get a job, he's not going to have money. He or she is not going to have a life. They are going to be in poverty. They are not going to be able to pay their health bills. Yeah. The reverse is also true. Someone who does not have a healthy lifestyle or is not healthy themselves, how are they going to go and work and earn for themselves? There's no way that's going to do it. If a woman does not have a healthy reproductive system, how is she going to give birth to a child that can survive beyond 5 years, right? So each of the SDGs are really, really, as Ajit said, 12 is the maximum that has interconnection, which is the responsible consumption and production. But honestly, each one of them are interrelated. Incidentally, 2 key documents or 3 things that I would quickly give as part of the collaboration piece where you understand that you can take it forward is, please look up. There is a whole mapping done by Niti Aayog of each and every SDG to the ministries as well as to the government schemes. Very happy to share that with you. So it's in public domain, but if anybody wants me to share it, I'm happy to do that. The second thing is there's a whole visualization tool that is available. Okay, unfortunately, it's only for a few countries, not for India, but still would be very, very helpful for you to understand the interlinkages between the different SDGs. So that's number 2, of course. And number 3, I think again over here is this whole partly visualization, but partly also the understanding that the whole SDGs is like this woolen ball, of 17 different colors, which are completely twisted and turned and kind of, interlinked together. And until we design our programs, our plans, and execute according to that, thinking of all these SDGs together, I think it'd be very difficult for us to really achieve the goal of saying no one left behind. So I think with that, Mrinan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you, Ajitji, and thanks a lot to Sapna. I think what I've gathered from all three of you, sorry for my voice because I've just recovered from COVID, but what I have gathered from what all three of you have said, and um, so typical because see, Sapna works for the government, and Sapna is clear that we have so many projects going on, and all of them involve deeply either an SDG very strongly within it, and then links up to the rest. For example, she gave Chilika Lake as an example, and where we all know Chilika is this brackish lake in Orissa, which supports a huge number of fisher folk and is one of its kind lake in the world. And it has Irrawaddy dolphins in it, and it is supported by by a government special vehicle, a special purpose vehicle. So we know about Chilika in terms of it and its environmental importance, and how India has maintained Chilika by controlling its mouth and stopping the sediments from closing it. And this has not only helped it has helped farmers and maintain fish stock. So it is a very important and a great example where India has been very successful in, and Orissa has done that very well. However, Sapna, the fact over here is that we need more chilikas. We need more of these happening all over the coast of India. And Orissa has been a very, very strong example of environmental conservation, coastal conservation, whereas the rest of the coast, like for instance, Gulf of Kutch, needs to do the same as well. So that replication is what interlinkages will actually represent in interlinkages. Similarly, Ajitji's point on it is not easy, and he clearly mentioned that first we need to go back to the basics and need to understand what SDGs are. The stakeholders need to be made aware of that. That particular point is very, very, very important because clearly, when the SDGs came into force, there were countries like Germany which made their national strategies based on that, and the Millennium Development Goals, which were the which preceded SDGs, those were essentially measured very well, because the government of India measured MDGs to the extent that Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation had an arm to measure the MDGs and send a report every year back to the UN on it. So measurement around SDGs have been a little less that way because the onus is shifted to Niti Aayog, and Karan mentioned Niti Aayog very clearly. That is where I think we need a little bit more emphasis. Very clearly, Caron has spoken about the tools that are available internationally to measure the interlinkages, and I've seen them as well myself. But we struggle with those tools at some point because they are so complicated and difficult to explain. So some of those measurements are very difficult to come through. It's just that we need to make it simple in Ajitchandran's words. But with this, I'm going to introduce the concept around, the whole idea is eventually to implement SDGs. The whole idea is to get there, to meet these targets and to meet these timelines. So I think what's more important, and what Tarun also mentioned in the beginning when he introduced Chevening Alumni, is innovation. With that, we need to get innovation right in the spotlight, because what is missing is, as we said, what is tying up is missing in SDGs, because SDGs are vast as compared to MDGs, which preceded them. Innovation in terms of measurement, innovation in terms of creating these interlinkages, making it simple, innovation in thinking. And that is what is the need of the hour. How do we prioritize, recall Ajitji very clearly said that if we identify the root cause of the problem, then we would be able to identify what is important to address. And that is where innovation is needed in prioritization, as well as changing our thinking, whether water is more important, whether climate is more important, poverty is important, or environment is important. So innovation by government, for instance, how Sapna spoke about a few projects which were quite innovative, and innovation by industry, innovation by citizens themselves, the stakeholders, in order to understand. So can this symposium, can this particular discussion that we're having over here discuss what these tools for innovation should be? So I'd like to invite once again, Tarun, Shuchin, Manu, and Neha, if they are here, and Prerna and Smita. Smita, from her, as Mr. Ajitchandran mentioned, from her experience with helping corporates, to come forth and talk about innovation. And the question that I'd like to put forth to you is, how can innovation and technology enable SDG implementation? How can innovation and thinking enable SDG implementation, and what are the main drivers for innovation? What are the main challenges for innovation? So over to you, Tarun, if you could start and shoot in.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much, Mrinal. In fact, I would just say that I did mention it very initially when I introduced this, that sustainable innovation is creating new products that can be produced with fewer carbon emissions, less waste, and an emphasis on enhancing wellness. So I would actually like to hear more from Dr. Shuchin Bajaj when we talk about wellness and healthcare industry. How does he think that this fits in? And then we just go around the table. Dr. Bajaj, over to you, please.
Sure, thank you. See, Mrinal, as Karen very clearly said, everything is linked together. SDG is not really blocks, it is a large multicolored ball, and it has, a lot of things interlinked together. So, innovation is not only an explicit focus of SDG 9 as we keep talking about it, but innovation is needed for achieving each and every SDG. It is needed for development also, and innovation is needed in development also. So both the things you have to very clearly say. As Karen said that, if you don't have a job, you can't really pay for your health bills, and it's absolutely true the other way around also, right? If you cannot take care of your health, for example, if you have diabetes and you don't recognize it, we as a organization, we hold almost 25 outreach camps every day across locations, going from village to village, going from kasbah to kasbah, and we are detecting more than 100 new diabetics every day who had no idea that they were diabetics earlier. And we use a lot of innovations around that, lot of technology around that, to achieve our SDGs on good health, zero hunger, zero poverty, right? So if you are diabetic, you don't know it, and you develop a complication, say a diabetic foot, and we are amputating one foot every minute across the world due to diabetes. The largest cause by far of chronic kidney failure is diabetes. So you say you develop kidney failure or you develop a diabetic foot and you come to the hospital, and you need your foot to be amputated. We can, tap ourselves on our back that we did it for free because we are an organization that is socially conscious. But is that really just that cost of disease that we saved him, say 25,000 or 50,000 rupees for his surgery? Is that really the cost of the disease that we are addressing here? The costs are so much larger. There is so much interlinkages going on, right? Because now he's lost his foot, or because he's lost his kidneys completely, he can't really go to work, the factory checks him out, so he's lost his job, and the cost then multiplies manifold because the future cost of his lost earnings run into lakhs of rupees, right? And the scariest cost is the intangible cost of the disease. Now because he's lost his job, he will pull his children out of school and start sending them to work. So future many generations will be destroyed because we could not have innovation in detecting diabetes in time, we could not have innovation in treating his diabetes in time and preventing complications. or or preventing his amputation, or treating his kidney failure better. So the ambitious nature of the 2030 agenda, aimed at, amongst others, ending poverty, reducing inequality in all forms, to promote inclusive and sustainable consumption and production systems, to provide full and productive employment, decent work for all. For all this, we require fundamental changes in the ways in which energy, food, water, housing, welfare, mobility, and all other goods, including healthcare, are delivered, distributed, or consumed. So, innovation is at the root and the heart of all these SDGs, just like linkages are. So, all of the things that we talk about SDGs, whether we see them as blocks of linkages and innovations and other things, everything is actually one thing. And I think we need more people like Karen who look at the bigger picture more, and lesser of us who are into more of laser focus, that I will look at only healthcare, and somebody will look at energy, and somebody will look at life underwater, and it's not really going to work, right? So I think we need more of Karens here who can actually look at it in a big way and think about how to address each and everything, so that either we achieve everything, or I don't think we'll achieve anything at all if we go on that block by block focus.
Thank you, Shuchin. That was very, very insightful. I think what you clearly said over here is that, if I can summarize, that link between health, poverty, and awareness, knowledge, basically. This is very important. And I think knowledge can be built through a very simple thing, which is digitization. And I will now go back to Tarun and ask him to talk about digitization and how IT can help in innovation and help actually prevent a lot of such things really happening.
So from IT perspective, Mrinal, I'll continue from where I started. I would say, I gave you an example of the farmers. If you look at, millions of drivers are using traffic apps that provide real-time data to avoid congestion and choose the fastest routes. If you look at the global corporates, for example, if you look at tech organizations like IBM, so IBM's PRISM, which is Plastic Recovery Insight and Steering Model, collaboration with the Chemical Industries Alliance to end plastic waste, aims to organize multitudes of data systems to track the movement of plastic waste globally, so as to improve waste management, recycling, and other options for communities, regulators, and citizens. In a similar way, if you look at some of the digital technologies, which has transferred, I would say transformed operations across industries, I'm also reminded about Walmart. So in an effort to understand which channels are more efficient, Walmart measured the greenhouse emissions and costs to fulfill a range of products ordered online versus sold in stores. So these insights helped Walmart identify ways to mitigate emissions by reducing split shipments and encouraging a shift to the most carbon efficient channel when possible. If you look at Unilever, their sustainable living brands portfolio is growing nearly twice as fast as other brands in its portfolio. Now, the reason I am giving all of these examples, because it's a big leap forward through digital technology, which is vitally important, avoiding the worst outcomes of accelerating climate change and other measures of an increasingly compromised planet. I would say that the reason I brought in some of these global examples was that they just bring to shape some tangible pointers that yes, the world is thinking about it, the world is moving about it, but we need to do more. And behind everything, tech is going to be there because it will make things simpler.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tarun. That was put very succinctly, and I think you just spoke about exactly what I wanted to hear. It's just that how I think question that we need to perhaps answer over here is how corporates and governments can work together, and maybe Smitha can come in over here because she's been working with corporates and she's also an NGO person, as to how this digitization, this innovation in knowledge can be the bridge can be built between corporates and government. Say Niti Aayog and corporates can work together. Would Smitha be able to speak on that?
Thanks, Mrinal. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here. Thanks, Karen and Dr. Ajit, for having me here and inviting me to this wonderful forum. I am, just to give you a quick background for people who may have probably seen me for the first time, is I'm Smitha Misra, based out of Delhi, and I run Fandoro Technologies, which is a startup, which, I mean, of course, it's been now more than 3 years. So if it qualifies to be startup still, which empowers businesses and investors to be more responsible. So we are looking with a vision. So our vision is to have only planet positive businesses, that there should be a time where we build only planet positive businesses, and only such businesses should be funded. And therefore, we help investors and businesses understand how to adopt sustainable business practices. Now, before I step into the corporate and government relationship thing, I was hearing the conversation for last 30-45 minutes, and I wanted to also add a couple of things that, going back, taking a step back, I also want to tell you is when I started to work on sustainability, SDG framework was where it was like I did not choose SDG framework, SDG chose me, because it was, I started to look at problems, and I saw poverty is a problem in this country, hunger is a problem, health access to good healthcare is a problem, quality education is a problem. So it is like there are so many problems, and there are teams. In fact, one of the reasons I did not go into a specific SDG or a specific area was there was such good people working on each of these areas in such depth. And my background is from technology. So I worked for the Fidelities and HCLs and Royal Bank of Scotland, all in the technology space for 17, 18 odd years. I cannot bring that depth and insight overnight. I will have to work in the space to really be able to contribute. But when I came across SDG framework, the whole reason that I became a huge fan of it and I adopted that as the underlying framework was the Inter Linkage, as you say. Okay. Something that the world doesn't understand is that you cannot change climate, you cannot, arrest the climate change or reverse the climate change without educating people about it, which you cannot do to a sick person. The people need to be healthy in a frame of mind to understand these things. Those people will only be healthy if they have access to good food, and they are having at least 2 meals, 3 meals a day. And that can only happen if they can afford that. You cannot forever, charities cannot be done enough for these people. So you need economy to work in that area. All of this is interlinked. You cannot solve one of them in silo. Now, when I take this understanding of mine and I go to the corporates and I start talking to them about SDGs and sustainability, one of the core pushback that you get is returns first or impact first. Because for them, it is still the game of return or impact. Are you making profits or are you going to be an impact company? People are moving from there to impact with returns. There are a lot of people who are now understanding that, the whole purpose of the businesses to exist is not just profit. You have to be, it has to be a purposeful profit. It has to be a meaningful profit, and it cannot harm the planet and the people on it. And therefore, that discussion is still in, it's not, the organizations are not even mature right now to really to that level. There are organizations who are at the level of we are not doing any harm. And then there are organizations at a level where they are actively looking at innovation to leverage the whole, the growth of green funds and green tech and the whole movement towards sustainability. They are leveraging those as a lever for economic growth also. And then there are organizations, and a lot of them who don't even care, or who are at like that stage, I'll just meet the regulatory compliances and I'll just make sure that I do not do any harm. And there's a huge gap between these two sets of, you have to mature quite few rounds incrementally to be able to leverage sustainability and through innovation for your economic benefits. Now, at that stage, when I talk to organizations who are okay to adopt SDGs more like an intent, more like, you know, a lot of people understand ESGs, to be very honest. You go to banks, you go to financial institutions, you talk to a lot of people. They may not understand SDGs, but a lot of them try to at least, or somehow they are aligned with the whole idea of ESG, because investors are beginning to ask about it. BlackRock is making so much of noise about it. So people are wanting to talk about net zero, carbon neutrality. They may not even understand how different net zero is from carbon neutrality, but they'll talk about it in their goals. And a lot of those things are happening. But the underlying theory which I tell them is, while ESGs are good, it's not ESG or SDG. It is ESG with SDG, because ESGs might be your measurements in certain areas, and you may be measuring your risks and metrics. But SDGs help you establish your intent with your customers, with your investors, with the society at large, and you can pick a theme and work on that. Now, when we come, but the gap that I see there again is, for private businesses, ESG takes over sometimes because the G there is very strong, the governance part, which I sometimes feel that SDGs is not catering to that area. That when we built SDGs, the targets, the indicators, they were catering to the nations, to the countries, to the public sectors, to the civil organizations. But when we come to private businesses, private investors, we haven't seen as many indicators added there, or as much measurement there for these businesses to contribute and get measured on. And that is one of the area where I clearly see, as Mrinal was asking, how do you see them, the government or the Niti Aayog working with the private businesses? Clearly, there is a need for the investors and businesses to work together along with the governments to do that, to work towards adopting particular SDGs and work on it. As far as the interlinkages are there, a very good example is circular economy. We are talking about it. We understand what would go in where, and the whole when you say that you're building a business with an idea of making it sustainable, it's a whole different thing, because you have to communicate it that way. So you have to, your operations, your actions, your strategy has to talk about it. You cannot go all the way, and since a lot of people here are from IT, they would understand you cannot build the whole product and then test it for performance and security and go back and make architecture level changes, because your core pillars, your partners, they need to be sustainable. You cannot go all the way through the business and then build it. And that is where, for businesses to work with and like you said, taking a step back again, there is $4.2 trillion, I believe, which is a gap for the world annually. Now that while nations are working towards SDGs, we are clearly saying there's a gap for the funds to drive these innovations. Innovations need funds, innovations need research, modeling, innovations need, a risk-based approach. What is the negative impact that you're going to create? How much are you going to reduce that? What is the positive impact you may create? How much are you going to increase that? Because innovations are happening. Do you want the innovation which takes you to Mars for 11 minutes of space trip? That is also an innovation. But then there is an innovation where you can probably do some cloud seeding. What kind of innovation do you want to fund? That becomes very critical, because funding is important for innovation. Who is going to pay for the 99 bulbs which did not really light up? You only get that, you only want to buy the 100th bulb, and that's where I think a significant how do you divert your funds into this, it becomes important. So whether it is government, whether it is private investors, I think one of the ways to work with private businesses through innovation and interlinkages towards SDGs clearly are, I think, two of the things I would definitely say is, one is, please fund basis the impact of the project, and make it very obvious that we are not going to tolerate, taking away the rights of our next generation to have a healthy planet, a clean planet. Because I see a lot of businesses still talking about GHG emissions, and in those terms, in terms of when you talk about environment, all they know is plant trees and there is GHG emissions. What they don't realize is world is already moving forward, and we are now talking about climate justice. We are talking about the human's right to have clean air. And if you are going to be polluting the air, you have to pay for my diseases that I get because of that. You cannot just keep on doing that for your profit. And that's the kind of, one is, of course, that kind of understanding, and therefore that level of, maturity in modeling the impact, and therefore funding. And the second is, I would absolutely, I've been talking about this, I would really want SDGs to have more indicators for private businesses and responsible investors in those areas, because the kind of some of the indicators that we have, governments can measure, private businesses cannot. And maybe if we could have a framework where private businesses could put up their numbers, which could contribute to Niti Aayog in a certain ratio, or national numbers, which would then also incentivize the whole process. Right now, they don't see how they are contributing to the bigger game. Yeah, that would be my piece. Sorry if I took a longer time.
No, that's really very, very insightful, and I think it's good to hear from somebody who's working with corporates, because they only understand ESG, which is environment and social governance. And when we bring in the idea of, say, even excuse me, climate change, or even the idea of SDGs, they don't know how to measure it. And that is where the challenge is. Can I go back to Sapna over here and bring her in? Because Sapna is working with the government and is a very senior person. Sapna, what do you say about it? How can government, say like the Niti Aayog or even the other ministries which have been mapped, as Karen pointed out, to various SDGs, if you're still around, how can we bridge this gap of lack of indicators with corporates?
Right. So, with the government, first of all, it's very complex because of the fact that there are several policies which have been written from many, many years being implemented on the ground, newer policies being written and so on. There's a lot of disconnect between what's happening in reality on the ground and what's, in the policy and so on, including implementation challenges and all of that. So it's easy to say that you could have the best indicators, etc., but garbage in, garbage out. So, if you're going to get data from any of these ministries or any of the work which is happening, very little data is available. That needs to be sanitized, needs to be cleaned up. You need to sieve out what is relevant and so on. And finally, be it health, be it water, air pollution, all of these need a lot of sensors, a lot of data from the ground. So state governments also have to be involved and so on. So it's a very complex issue. It cannot be just, explained in simple terms. In terms of industry, of course, it's a smaller, each industry, they take care of their own supply chain, they take care of their own responsible, businesses and business models and so on. Maybe that's doable. But if you are talking about, each of the line ministries, is very complex. Ministry of Statistics would be able to play a very, reliable and a very good role here. If they, start educating people and each of those, officers and their teams in terms of what's important in terms of SDGs and how do they face it, and also start somewhere, maybe they'll be able to do a good job of it. But I'm pretty sure that those sitting in the capital may not be the ones who would be doing this work. It has to come ground up. I've done enough and more work in the government in skills as well as in other areas to know that the information or the data which we have in many of these areas are incomplete or are, it could be, I wouldn't like to use the word fictitious, but, they may not be so accurate as one would want the information to be. So the measurement of these indicators and alignment will only happen when you have enough data from the ground. Otherwise, it's cooked up data, which is not really going to be relevant. Thank you.
Can I come in for a moment?
Yes,
Just
please.
to add on to it? Yeah, Sapna has given again the nuances when working with governments. I would like to share a little bit about what we did in Canada. There's something called the Montreal Protocol. And there was a need for having criterion indicators. So we were grappling with understanding how we can link these with what we are doing. See, basically, why is the criterion indicators important? Is that we want to understand what we are doing and then have a report, which is generally a requirement at different levels. And this levels is what is important. What I would like to say is, see, at the international level or supranational level, there is a requirement of a different kind, information of a different kind. National level would require a different kind of information. If you go down below at the level of state or provinces, they would require slightly nuanced data. And when you come down right up to the community level, they may require something different. So the thing we found was it is important to link these different requirements, keeping the situation at that level. So if a community wants to have a more nuanced approach to understanding something happening in that area, they can create further criteria and indicators. But let's have some commonality in all this so that at the top level, they get all the information. So it's like a branch, So you require key information at the supranational level. You need to report to the UN or other places. At the national level, you require it at the Niti Aayog for designing programs and things like that. But when it comes to the community level, they want to have a more nuanced understanding of what's happening. So they need to have more criteria indicators. So I work with provinces like Yukon and British Columbia to come out with these criteria and indicators. And then we knowingly link it with the ones above. So in the same way, when we also talk about understanding SDGs across India, we also need to understand who requires what. They have to decide at that level. Those stakeholders have to decide, but they also have to not to work in a silo again. They have to look at, what does the district want, what does the state want, what does the national level want. So keeping those existing requirements, then you design here. So I mean, this is just an example which I thought to give an idea of what's happening in some other place.
No, that's a very good example, because Montreal Protocol is something that we've actually achieved. So it's actually a success. And I think what I would like to, what you said, Ajitji, is basically that a pyramid approach to data, and perhaps more detailed data availability at the ground level, and then picking it up. However, I remember going to Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementations to figure out how the data was put together for MDGs before the SDGs came into force. And they used to collect data from states, and mostly the data related to information on how much money the states have spent on a particular program in that field. Which is enough to report. However, what the problems that MOSPI faced was very clearly, Smitha, I'll come to in a second, was very clearly related to finances to actually collect this data. So Smitha, over to you. You wanted to say something.
Yeah, I'll very quickly. I think somebody did just post it. So I wanted to also add that while we are talking about corporates and government, I mean, there are gaps where we can work together, but there are a couple of things which of course have happened very strongly in that direction. While the regulatory landscape for the entire world is changing, if you look at EU taxonomy, SFDR, and the SEC in US, it's changing. Indian government has also taken very significant steps to adopt SDGs based sustainability, business responsibility, sustainability reporting. So the new report which has come in, and at least the new guidelines which are there, the NGRBC, National Guidelines for Responsible Business Conduct, they for sure claim to adopt. In fact, they are really good. I mean, if you read through the NGRBC, you would feel like if we could just adopt these, we would really be doing very well on our businesses. So that does connect the SDGs between the, and as a bridge. It does work between the private businesses and the government. And moving forward, if we believe what the MCA notification says, the guideline says, that this BRS index is going to be there online, and you'll be filing your BRSR much like your GST. And the index that gets created is going to be, the indexing that happens will be leveraged for procurement with these businesses, which would be a serious economical benefit. Why you would want to be a good, responsible, sustainable business. So I think that is certainly something that government has done. And there was one comment I was just seeing that corporates, they do understand ESG versus SDG. Yes, they do, and clearly SDGs are not able to show them any direct impact on their top line, bottom line, anywhere. And that is where the hitch is. That is where the pushback is, that how does it really help? Why should a business look into it? So that needs to be well made aware of and made simple. even the larger organizations find it difficult to adopt the whole framework. And as it is, there are tons of reporting frameworks they work through, the tons of goals that they're taking up. Somebody's working on SBTI, somebody wants to report through CDP, somebody wants to do it through TCFD, SASB and GRI were always there. With so many things, SDGs framework becomes something that people are, maybe they're not willing to put in time or something, but yes, it's not simple enough for them to very quickly say, okay, these are indicators, do this. So the checklist approach is always easy. Do this, you'll get this benefit. That is something you are not able to showcase in SDGs very clearly for private businesses. And maybe that's an opportunity also to somehow try to simplify the whole indicator game there, but at the same time also educate people that, that's not the only way to, quantity is not the only way to measure. Sometimes you have to do things qualitatively also.
Yeah, it's very challenging that ways as to how SDGs can benefit businesses. Where do that benefit needs to be brought forth, and also a mechanism to measure. Like if you have an index which you can fill up online and tick and check, then that will help your business change. So it's not just quantity; it's also quality. I think I would like to bring in Prerna over here, who basically works in data, and can she advise us on how all of this can be tied together through data? Is Prerna there as a panelist?
No, I don't think so.
I saw a comment, and so I thought she is around.
Is it Prerna Goradia?
Yeah, Mr. I'd introduced her.
Yeah, I've.
I think she's not there.
She's not there. Okay, so let's then. I think let's just move on quickly.
Maybe Sundar, Dr. Sundararajan could help, because she is also working on
help over here in understanding of data and how we can manage it, because it may get very complicated. And we found that making these indexes were quite complicated actually to measure SDGs.
Thanks, Ajit, for inviting me here. Just making sure if my sound is coming out. Fine.
Yeah.
It has been fascinating to listen to all of you. Just introducing myself, my name is Sundararajan. I work with a non-profit called INREM, and in fact, when I was listening to all of you, I mean this analogy of a fox and hedgehog, right? Of a hedgehog just having a very narrow focus on just one thing to be working on. I would rather I was seeing myself as that. I work on clean and safe water, which is a very important SDG goal related to goal number 6 and also to other SDGs. And quite often the challenge of data has come and hit us a lot, and several challenges and issues within it, which probably might be interesting and valuable to the audience here. So when it comes to data in something specific that I work on, which is water, then I mean the urgency of data, transparency, availability to everybody has been increasing and a lot over the years. For the past 15 years that I have been observing, the government has pushed for increasing transparency of data, availability of data, and that has really made a big difference to how different stakeholders, whether CSRs or corporates or NGOs, or even individual citizens respond to the problem of water. But also we see cycles in this whole issue of data. So to give a particular specific example, back in 2010, Government of India put open a lot of huge data sets related to water and drinking water, amounting to what today we will call and refer to as big data. And there was a lot of access and to such information for, let us say, around 5 to 6 or 7 years. But then I think it also opens up a lot of challenges in terms of governance, in terms of what data throws up for a policymaker. When you actually open up data, then I mean the entire process of data generation. And I think one of the earlier speakers spoke about it. I mean, a whole lot of people start questioning about the information, right? Which is actually put up in a public portal, because one can actually go and verify, one can do blind tests, and then you start recognizing that yes, the intention was good, and then it is leading to a lot of action, by different stakeholders and improvement. But then somewhere the policymaker, or the policies which actually put out the data in this case actually went back beyond a point of time, and I mean a wall of difficult accessibility really came in after a few years. And in fact we went back in terms of transparency of water data access, after I would say a 6 or 7 years period of really opening up. In fact, the last few years, a broad trend which has emerged is, I would say, I broadly refer it as the dashboard syndrome, and many of you might probably recognize it. I mean, what I say as a dashboard syndrome is that, I mean, you find good, shiny, beautiful dashboards which are user centric, but then nothing beyond it. I mean, in the good old world, before I would say 2013, 14, 15. I mean, little bit before the modern advent of dashboards, you actually had access to raw public data, which is of various sectors, not just water or health, or many sectors. But then increasingly, I think there is also a going back in terms of transparency of data, where you don't see much beyond dashboards. And I think this is also a pushback to realizing the that when you actually make data open, then it comes with a huge responsibility of the processes behind it, accuracy behind it, and being really able to stand up for the challenges that data throws up. I mean, in terms of governance and policy, and who is responsible for data generation itself. So yes, today, if you look at one of the primary flagship programs of Government of India, you have Jal Jeevan Mission, and a wonderful system which is based on the COVID model, which the JGM has also adopted. And again, a lot of people-centric data systems where different stakeholders contribute data, but at the end of the day, it is still a dashboard, right? So I mean, say, there's a gradual opening up and maybe more access, but unless there is a I'm not for complete opening up of information for everybody. There has to be um, a thoughtful exposure of verifiable data in terms of different SDG domains, such as water, health, education, or others. But I mean, this whole fear of opening up public information, because it throws up all the challenges, for the person who's sitting there and responsible for it. I think it's something for us to really recognize, and then really work upon, because that is something which is really pushing back and threatening this whole access to information and data. I'll pause here and maybe come back for a later interaction.
Thanks a lot. I think this thing about having transparent data and data which is not, and having actual data and not just a dashboard is quite an important point. And therefore, what I understand from that is that we need funds to collect this data. At different levels, with Mr. Ajitchandran had earlier mentioned, in a pyramid approach and top to bottom, international, national, state, and communities. So there has to be a serious thought behind it as to how that data is connected and who needs what data. However, there is just one point over here that I'd like to make from my interactions with the government earlier, is that the government would not actually want to, say the Indian government in particular, that's my experience only, may not want to share the national data that they have with an international agency like the UN. And perhaps that is where the thrust in collecting data on meeting SDGs is a little lowered. And there is a certain hesitancy in sharing this data internationally. And therefore, we would have to internally spend money, our government and corporates, as Smitha pointed out, would have to spend money to collect that data for who? And that is a point that maybe is why SDG monitoring and measurement is taking a back seat a little bit. Would any panel member want to comment on that?
Mrinal, I'm just going to come in very quickly.
Yeah.
We may not have realized, but we've already crossed over an hour.
Yes, I am looking at the time.
You
Yes.
know, so maybe the others don't. So I'm just kind of saying, sometimes we think, oh no, I mean, it's too long, but that's how fast the time is already gone. And we just have about 45 minutes remaining. So two things I'm going to request, of course, Mrinal, if you can bring in more new people so that everybody gets a chance, it'd be great. And two is, of course, keep posting on the chat box and also start looking at collaboration opportunities. So anything that you'd like to either ask for or get also, please definitely put it down and let's look for some outcomes.
Please put your question and answers in the Q&A box, and I will take them with the panel as we go along, because I'm the one who's asking questions. These questions I hope to get from the audience, particularly the students who are there. There are several students I saw from Ambedkar University who are already here in the
and
panel.
also Priya is here, of course, and I think Nandita has been posting quite furiously, so maybe we want to look at that.
So welcome, Priya. Priya is the president of Chevening Alumni India, who's co-hosting this event with RISE. And welcome, Priya.
Thank you very much, Mrinal, Karen, Ajit. Lovely to see all of you. Very interesting discussion. I'll be participating in it in a bit now, later on when my subject comes in. Till then, I'm happy to listen to everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Thank you. I think with that, I think it's my cue to move on. And Karen has pointed out that time is passing. I will move on to diversity, and I think that there are a lot of questions still left around data and reporting, but that is for a later pointer towards the end. We'll pick these questions up. The third point that we felt when we were creating this program or this discussion, that for implementation, it is very important that all sectors on all strata of the society are involved. One of the key aspects that the implementation of SDGs it requires is bringing diverse groups together to create change. Women, particularly, state level representatives, differently abled, marginalized groups. For implementation to be effective, it needs to be equitable. And that is where diversity comes in as an important aspect, and key stakeholders. These are key stakeholders, and they need to be given special positions in SDG implementation. Their voices need to be heard. And therefore, now we would like to address this issue as to how projects and activities can mainstream diversity within themselves. So I would request Priya Hingorani, who is a top lawyer in India, and also a women activist, to start this discussion and come on board and talk to us about the various goals and targets and indicators, if she can, or just how gender is an important pillar of governance in SDGs, and how gender needs to be given a special emphasis.
Thank you, Nal. Having heard all of you on various aspects of the SDG, I feel, women are on the lowest rung of SDG at the moment. There is so much to be done. There is so much at the grassroots level, at the panchayat level, at the district levels, which needs to be done, which we somehow, despite, talking of economic reforms, talking of these goals that the government has set, that we are not able to somehow infiltrate to that level to be able to make impact. My worry is that, the fact that so much discussion takes place and the implementation of the schemes, of the laws, of the orders of the court don't actually reach that point, is how do we take it forward? How do we do? I think that's something where we look for very constructive suggestions from everyone and see how we can put it in action. Over the years, we have seen such great judgments being passed by the Supreme Court, whether it is related to police reform, security of women, all these recent laws on acid attacks, on rape laws, we find that um, while there is so much on paper, one, we don't have the infrastructure. Two, we don't have the resources. Three, despite the fact that in India we have so much manpower, we don't have skilled manpower. We don't have manpower to actually, the trained manpower to actually take this forward. So these are my concerns, which I feel somebody is, we need to address in a platform like this, where we need to learn and take examples from international perspectives. When we talk of interlinkages, when we talk of international collaborations, how it is taken up in different jurisdictions is something we need to learn or exchange our ideas. On the issue of women, I mean, of course, there's a lot of there are a lot of statistics available across the world and in India as well, as to what is, how much is empowerment, how much is education, how much is violence related to women. But what I have found now in these last few years is that women are willing to take the positions of power, the positions, key roles, are willing to push against the barriers, the glass ceilings. But somehow those opportunities are not there, are not created enough. We've just seen recently what's happened with the armed forces, and I mean, kudos to the women who have fought for many years to reach that point where women in the armed forces are now in strategic positions. But when we look at the women vis-a-vis the SDG goals, I mean, we are lacking, whether it is in companies, corporate companies, heads of governance, corporate companies, directorships. They all have to work harder than the male counterparts have to work. They have to prove themselves harder than the male counterparts have to prove themselves. So I think these are concerns which we should discuss, and I leave it at that and take it and I be happy to hear from the others.
You're on mute, Mrina.
You're on mute, Mrina.
Yeah, thank you, Priyaji. This is a good start to the conversation. There are a lot of other important panelists that we've got over here. We've got Manu Goel, who's just joined, who's also a Chevening scholar and also a governing council member. There is Nandita over here, and she's been writing a lot on the chat, and Nandita Mathur, and she's just written around sustainability requires contextualization within thresholds, with an example probably, and she's asking Mr. Iyer to elaborate.
Actually, we could bring in Nandita because she's worked in UNDP. She will give a perspective on data, as well as on the innovations they're doing to bring inclusivity. She's working on some interesting projects.
I think, Nandita, would you like to join in here and elaborate, take over from where Priya left, and also where Smitha and others left on data, and perhaps give us a holistic view?
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nandita. I'm working with Sustainable Development Goals Coordination Center in Punjab. So this is a UNDP body which is working with Department of Planning in Punjab exclusively on sustainable development goals. So the entire idea of setting up SDG coordination center within state governments is to provide the requisite impetus to the sustainable development goals within the government machinery. So UNDP has been given this mandate by Niti Aayog, and we're supporting states. So we have SDGs across multiple states. So coming back to the discussion we were having, one key focus area for us is that SDGs is all about, I think we've discussed enough on inclusivity. So whole of government and whole of society approach. That's it's like a key cornerstone for us. When we're working with government, or when we started working with government, especially around data, more often than not, we heard that this is another paper exercise that we've been asked to do. It's not going to change anything. It doesn't lead anywhere. This is another paper exercise. And it was just a very difficult conversation to have, right from the administrative secretaries to the IT operator who's actually supposed to input data on the portals. So one thing that we've done is we've created 4-year action plans with the government, which is mapping all schemes, all programs across indicators and targets. Another thing that we've tried to do is divide these indicators or divide these processes into a process, output, and outcome indicator. So, for example, we are saying that X amount of as in a PDS system in the matter of zero hunger, this kg of rice is to be provided to the families below below poverty line. So now process, if you're say giving them or issuing them an ID or issuing them a card is a process indicator, but that would also was being counted as success metric in the government machinery. So it was very crucial for us to divide these indicators into process, output, and outcome, which are long-term indicators, of course. I heard about the dashboard syndrome. I understand, though I partially agree to it, that yes, there are too many dashboards. There is a lot of data availability, but for us, it kind of helped. It has, because it is kind of shows a mirror to the government machinery and to, the departments, the line departments, on where you're performing, how you're performing. So what we've been able to achieve at Punjab is that we've been able to create a state dashboard. And we are mapping schemes, programs on that. The Inter Linkages of SDGs is also playing a crucial role there. So, there are multiple schemes that are impacting multiple goals and targets and indicators. So, the department say, okay, so I'll give you a very, very, very recent example. In a very recent meeting with Niti Aayog, there was a discussion on SDG 6, groundwater and sanitation, where Punjab does not fare very well. Though the drinking water portion is kind of worked out, but the groundwater contamination is very, very high. So, there was a discussion within the department, why is it being counted under my department and not with the other department? So these dashboard kind of helped us create that linkages, those interlinkages and those interdependabilities within the government. So in terms of data, another thing that we worked out is budget mapping. There's a clear budget mapping exercise. In fact, that is something that the Haryana government has done, is how they've mapped their SDG outcomes and outputs with every budget item. So you know how much you're spending on processes, how much you're spending on outputs, and how much you're spending across all SDGs. And that is again something that is reflecting in the dashboard. So for us, data management has taken some time and has taken a lot of time to kind of build the capacities within the government on this. But yeah, we're working on it, and I'm sure slowly and steadily we'll be getting there. I think I'll be happy to come back, if you want to so we've been I discussed the whole of society approach. That was the other part of what we're working on, is on partnerships with academia, with private sector on multiple platforms. So, we're working on academia partnerships we've done on 2 levels. One is with the universities and one is with the school students. So I think one very, very crucial portion that we're working is getting more, getting into that dialogue, engaging students and universities and teachers and principals, getting into that dialogue. So I think the first 5 minutes of discussion where we said that unpacking these SDGs for them. It's not some paper exercise, it's not just fancy words which are for summits and forums. It's something that it impacts you and me at the same level, and it is something that all of us should look forward to. And I think COVID also kind of created, if I have to look at a silver lining from COVID, was this. We said, if you need one hope, SDGs are giving you that hope. So please cling to that. Go back to the basics. So yeah, that's been one of the areas. Regarding corporates, we've just started work. So in fact, I was very interested. The past half an hour, 40 minutes were very interesting in terms of how do we get more corporates aligned. And there's been discussions on GRI reporting, on how does GRI is working with corporates, how do we get more of them to engage. So I think a lot of corporates that we've engaged with are not big corporates. We're working with smaller corporates, or not corporates, or the smaller SMEs and MSMEs who do not understand SDGs, maybe how the MNCs or corporates do. So unpacking SDGs for them also has been something of a major capacity building exercise that we're doing. Do I have like 1 more minute? I just want to go on not too much of yeah. So
please go ahead, because this is very important insight we're getting from states and actual work that's happening on ground. So yeah, please go ahead.
Just one more point that I wanted to make was in terms of SDG localization. That's a major mandate that Niti Aayog and UNDP are working on taking SDGs to the national and subnational level. We've been successful in getting SDGs, as a first pilot that we've done in Punjab is in Patiala district, where we have included SDGs in the GPDP plans, in the Gram Panchayat development plans, and which is one of its kind. It's supposed to be there, but it's a very, again, becomes a paper exercise. But we've been able to demonstrate that how you can engage women, discussion with self-help groups, discussion with sarpanches, farmers, marginalized communities on GPDP plans. GPDP plans is supposed to be, it's a program that's launched on October 2nd, and all panchayats are supposed to create these GPDP plans. When we went to the field, we realized people said, oh, this is the first time that we know that something like this is supposed to be done by us. Because when there was a plan which was created by Sarpanch and maybe 2-3 more people in the community and was updated. Now we're creating that awareness on SDGs and mapping these GPDP plans with SDG. We've done a pilot so far, but we're working with PRI institutions, engaging more women at the grassroots level, just to ensure that the SDG localization takes place. And for that, it's very, very crucial to simplify and unpack SDGs for all stakeholders. So I'll stop there. Just wanted to bring this point.
Thanks a lot, Smitha. So, sorry, thanks a lot, Nandita. Sorry, one quick point. Are you engaging with the Ministry of Statistics as well and the reporting agencies, Niti Aayog?
Right. So, yeah, we because we're working with Department of Planning, and Department of Planning reports to MOSPI. So we support the state on data collection and data analysis and all of that, but our engagement as UNDP is mostly with Niti Aayog. MOSPI engagement is with department, because MOSPI engages with the state departments directly, and we're supporting the department in whatever information MOSPI needs and whatever data analysis is required. We're supporting the State Department on that.
Thanks a lot. That's a good insight. And also we understood that women are getting involved at the Gram Panchayat level, where they are learning about mapping of SDGs. So the awareness is being built at that level. So that sounds, that's very, very good insight. And we're at 4 o'clock, so we've got half an hour left. I'd like to invite Shreyas Jesima, who's with us, I believe, and under the diversity agenda again, go back to it and ask him to speak about how, this question around how diversity can actually help in implementation, and how diversity, bringing in diverse groups, in his opinion, from his experience, can help SDG mobilization.
Thank you, Mrinal, and thank you, Karen and the organizers. In your list of participants and stakeholders, I classify myself as a learner. And so it's been an amazing learning experience to hear you all. But there is only one person so far, has Smitha, has spoken about perhaps the need to integrate the justice systems. And of course, Priya, my profession, spoke about it as well. But I want to emphasize that just as we find it obvious that public health is not the preserve of one profession, i.e. the medical profession or the pharmaceutical profession, similarly, justice must be acknowledged as a public good, not the preserve of the legal profession, and certainly something that the sovereign state cannot purely deliver on its own. And if you look at the justice ecosystem that is developing using either technology or even experiments to use, certainly there are reports now from the Niti Aayog, the Supreme Court itself, on online dispute resolution. What you're looking at is addressing these complaints, the million complaints of injustice and the lack of diversity, the lack of inclusion. These are not matters for lawyers to opine alone. This is about time that other professionals, other citizens call out political parties for not putting justice on the manifestos high enough, not prioritizing it. So far, there's been the talk on Sustainable Development Goal number 16 is far too often commented on only by lawyers. And that to me is a very dangerous trend. It's a trend that must be reversed. We talked so much about interlinkages. Why is it that 16 is not interlinked as much with everything else? And so I would encourage friends and listeners to please recognize that the lessons of the feminist movement was simply this, to say that the personal is the political. And therefore, justice is not something out there, far away and distant and unreachable. It cannot be divorced from your conduct in your private life, from your behavior at home, behavior with your colleagues, and an integrated approach to justice and therefore also addressing the instances of inclusion and diversity are key. One cannot see this as very different. Another philosopher put it this way, that what we understand love to be as a private emotion in the private sphere, that is what justice is as a sentiment in the public sphere. And so it simply cannot be divorced. So I would like to emphasize and in my comment, Mrinal, to your earlier question, that it's not just diversity and inclusion, but a deeper integration of fairness, right conduct. And if you look at, let's say, one of the topics we've not touched upon so far is faith. Much of these discourses take place ignoring that 95% of certainly India and certainly many parts of the world, I don't know if the statistics are right, but that's just my assessment, is people follow some faith or the other. Now, yes, there may be large sections of the population worldwide and within India who choose not to be associated with faith, but there is a tremendous insight that is available in the universalist faith-based approaches as well, of integration, of seeking interlinkages, of then ensuring that the language of justice is not othered, that it is not an imposition from the United Nations or New York or London, but whether it is concepts from the Vedas or the Upanishads, the Quran Sharif, or wherever else, or even domestic practices, Ubuntu in South Africa, these are indigenous concepts. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is merely that. It is a mere declaration of what existed earlier across all cultures. And this deep and even a sense of pride in our being able to speak our own justice language, our own inclusivity language, without aping, without necessarily translating into our languages from English. And therefore, I think there needs to be much deeper engagement. And I would say, even we talked so much about the corporates. I mean, I'd be interested to see how the 1,000 companies in the that SEBI will require will address, particularly gender inclusion and inclusivity, and what is their response to justice per se as being an SDG, in their reporting standards. How has it impacted their dispute resolution policies? How has it created a more inclusive workspace? And so I think a more holistic debate is called for, and I once again congratulate Karen and the others for pulling this off. Thank you.
I think, Shreyas, you've sort of, it's very strong what you've actually said over here. That goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. And the goal actually reads, promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. That's the actual wording of the goal. This has seriously not been brought up so strongly when we talk about SDGs. Because when SDGs came into force in 2016, they followed Millennium Development Goals, and they replaced them in the UN system. And MDGs essentially were more oriented towards development. They're more like, health, malaria eradication, women health, and environmental issues were not very deeply embedded in it, and SDGs came into being to put those in. And we have several environmental goals, and we have several goals on economic growth, because India and countries like India went and negotiated and said, no, we would like economic growth to be a goal. So these things, and institutions, etc., these things got a huge emphasis. Whereas this goal 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions, which are actually needed to implement the rest, have actually taken a back seat. So somehow it should not just be the lawyers like yourself and Priyaji who should be talking about diversity and justice. This needs to be brought forth, because without that particular pillar, we're actually missing the implementation to a great extent. So this really is pretty strong. And somehow these get a little bit, because finance is not there, because data is not there. We're talking about practicalities at the moment. A lot of the serious issues also, which involve, say, faith that you've mentioned, which can promote justice, have not been used as tools to implement these. So that's a very important point that we have, that you brought forth, and a very diverse point. So thank you for that. I would like to now, I think we had a very good discussion till now.
May I come in, please?
Yeah.
We do like to bring in more voices and keep it as diverse as possible. We have two people with their hands up.
I just saw that, yes.
Kumar Iyer and Rajesh, if you could bring them in, please.
So let me just go through the entire list of panelists. And we have, on the diversity aspect, we actually had, so we've got Shreyas and Priya, both have spoken, and Sundarajan has also spoken. So I think we can take the hand raises, and we can go to Manu, who's also here after that, to talk about technology a bit in smart cities, from which she's working. But Manu, thank you for joining us. I will just first take the two hand raises. Kumar Iyer and Brajesh Chaturvedi have raised their hands. So Kumar Iyer, would you like to speak first?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, my name is Kumar. I work in the area of creating value. Creating value is a holistic approach to sustainability, which talks about, or is inclusive of all 17 SDGs, not in looking at each one in isolation. There are a few things that we work on. Every single KPI which has to be achieved based on a threshold. You cannot talk about equality, or you cannot talk about justice, or you cannot talk about women empowerment in isolation. What we say is, for any organization, you say you believe in equality. What is your gender ratio? It should be at least equal to the local demography. The ratio between genders should equal the local demography. You cannot have a workforce composition which varies hugely from what the local demography is. That is a threshold. Nandita had asked for examples of threshold. I'm giving you examples of thresholds that we work with. Two, we talked about, just now you talked about peace, justice, and equality. One of the thresholds that we work on is the average male salary to the average female salary in an organization should be 100, the ratio should be 1 plus minus 0.05, which means they should be between 95 to 105% of each other, irrespective of whether it is a woman-run organization or it's a man-run organization. You cannot have discrimination, but you cannot have reverse discrimination either. These are thresholds that we work on. The third thing is about, we all talk about GHG emissions, we all talk about water pollution. What we say is the water that you let out of the boundaries of your premises should be of a comparable quality to the water that is coming into your premises, or better. This way, we are forcing organizations to resort to 100% recycling. These are the only ways, only by putting these thresholds will you be able to fight against the be able to achieve the SDGs. Otherwise, without thresholds, and this is what Alan White said in 2006. This is what Dana Meadows talked about in 1998. Thresholds are known. Scientific evidence has been around since the last 30 years. We don't want to listen to these scientific evidences because it's not comfortable. It means our profits come down. It's not good music to our ears. So what do? We build artificial benchmarks. We give them check boxes to tick without actually saying anything. And that's what all reporting standards have done. And that is why the latest standard which ISSB has put out has come under a lot of fire because there are no thresholds in the ISSB standard either. So, I mean, I'm pretty vocal on this because I know that the way, the path that we are on, the SDGs are not going to achieve the goal. And in 2030, in 2030, we are going to have another set of standards which will say, sorry, we missed it, but here are a new set of standards. Let's try and achieve this by 2040, by which time 50% of the global south would have disappeared. So, you know, the time for action is now. Time for interlinking, time for threshold-based SDGs is now. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Iyer, I think we've got your point that thresholds and standards need to be sort of made very, very clear, and that is where we're struggling, and which is why we're having these debates. I would like to also bring in Mr. Chaturvedi.
Mrinal, just 1 second, if I can just say.
Yeah, go ahead. If we're short on time, that's the only reason.
No, just one point.
Yeah.
It's not that we don't know thresholds. It's not that corporates don't know about thresholds. They don't want it because it means they are affecting the constituency that they believe is most important, which is the shareholders. And it's only for that they don't want to talk about thresholds. Otherwise, they know everything. They know all these things. You can't afford to be in business without knowing these things.
Yeah, I mean, but there are multiple things. Yeah, thank you very much. I understand, and there are multiple challenges over here. Of somebody has just written in the chat box saying, a major MDG that was not achieved was WASH. Yet in the SDGs, it is overshadowed when people do not have. Vinita has written this, when people do not have access to water and sanitation, basic, and then we are talking about further standards. In a country like India, where when you're looking at poverty, goes hand. Amartya Sen said that India is a country, it's like sub-Saharan Africa floating in, islands of California floating in sea of sub-Saharan Africa. So when we have two different dichotomy and we have two challenges to meet, one is of poverty and another is of meeting standards, where do we focus on? And that becomes a little challenging. But I would like to further quickly go on to Mr. Chaturvedi to make his point in short, so that we can go on further.
Audible to everybody?
Yes,
Hello.
Prakash, go ahead. Yes.
What I want to say that we want to, it is necessary to involve the local people in the SDGs. What should be done about that? And what we have adopted the strategy for that, through our community radio, we involve the local people and the authorities, and we give the common platform to them, where these authorities and the local people come and they talk about the different SDGs, particularly the 3, 4, 5, and 8. I was also involved in the child rights section, and we call at every Friday these street and slum children at our spot, and we give them training of junior RJs. And on 2 days, on Saturday and Sunday, the program of these children are being broadcasted. So they give the platforms are needed, and a common platform for all the stakeholders, so that they can talk about these SDGs and what are their rights, what are their duties too, and then we can proceed further in a small segments in local way through this mass media, these anything can be utilized, just we are utilizing community radio. Thanks a lot. That was my point.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for raising that. I mean, we have platforms from, say, institutions like UNDP, and we have platforms even from Niti Aayog and other youth. There are actually a lot of platforms out there. There are serious youth platforms which for awareness generation on SDGs. We need to localize them. That is very, very, very correct, and particularly if we have to get the diversity in. So thank you, Mr. Chaturvedi, for that comment. Can I get quickly Manu into this? And if she wants to add her views on technology and cities, perhaps, and smart cities, and we can then further go towards closing.
So much, Manal. I'm very happy to be here. I'll give a short introduction on myself. I'm a practicing architect and planner, and we work on smart cities as well as a lot of large-scale industrial and commercial projects. Concerning with SDGs, I think designers, architects, planners, both as planners of individual buildings as well as planners of cities, have a huge role to play when it comes to SDGs. One of the goals that I think has not been discussed, at least from what I have listened to, is talking about sustainable cities and communities. And I think technology has a huge role to play. We know that India, about 1/3 of our population stays in cities already. And we have many tier 2, tier 3 cities who are very soon going to explode the way our population is growing, the numbers that we have, and the kind of the rate at which the infrastructure is developing in our country, both in terms of roads and built infrastructure of various kinds, public transport, public buildings, and so on and so forth. So if sustainability is not kept at the center of this agenda, we will very soon land ourselves into a situation where the infrastructure will be a lopsided development, where not adequate focus may be there on a balanced approach towards development. We also have a very unique situation in our country where we have a dichotomy, we have inequalities, both in terms of financial inequalities and the kind of resource. Yesterday also in the discussion, that's the point that I was trying to make, is talking about resource and technology. So I think when development is happening as an architect and planner, I think it's about making the best use of the resources that you have and making it equally accessible to everyone, imparting, having a sustainable thought process regarding the development. So in terms of looking at the life cycle costs of every material that you may be using, every intervention that you may be putting, what's going to happen with this built infrastructure, how is it going to be maintained, how is it going to impact the carbon emissions in my city, and so on and so forth. Normally, it's a very commerce-driven market, and these are the things which are not talked about by practitioners much. But I think this is one of the key things that should be at the center of the agenda. So yeah, primarily referring to sustainable cities and communities, both in terms of lifestyle decisions and also in terms of policy decisions, that what is the kind of development that we are. So for example, if we are looking at Delhi, we have a situation where the horizontal...
May I just interject? Would you like to emphasize on innovation in cities, perhaps? And give
Sure. So we know that as part of our practice, we all are looking at cleaner energy solutions within the cities. So we recently did, as part of our project, all the government buildings that were there in that particular city, the rooftops, we had installed solar, which would offset the electricity bills and generation for the public infrastructure. So even small moves like this can actually be, they're technology based. So technology can be used to manage the resources that we already have and run them in a sustainable manner, making it accessible to all. That's the point that I was trying to make earlier as well.
Thank you so much. I think most of our panel members have been able to put their views forth, and if there are any questions from the attendees as well as the panelists, it'll be great. We can take them on. We've got around 8 minutes left. So we can summarize very quickly. Both Karen and I can summarize. I'll just give you a quick view of what I've understood, that since we started with initially with Sapna giving her inputs that the government is actually doing a lot of projects and they are interlinked and they have multiple benefits across SDGs and she gave certain examples. Ajit also gave us an understanding of governance and awareness and scanning the horizon and creating data. And going to the root cause essentially to understand the interlinkages. And Caron also said that she emphasized on the bigger picture and basically how SDGs cannot be seen in just a silo. Shuchin and Tarun emphasized upon innovation very clearly, and also which also took us back to interlinkages again. That health is linked with poverty and with awareness, and how data can help put together information on health and save lives. Smitha gave very important input in from the corporate side and innovations needed there, and the requirement of corporates for measurements and was clear. Success of Montreal Protocol because data was collected in a certain manner, in a criterion manner, and data, who are you collecting the data for? The dashboard syndrome was talked about, and of course, without inclusion of women, as Priya said, it is not possible to meet the SDGs. We had very insightful inputs from UNDP and Nandita, the kind of work she's doing with Punjab government and mapping and data SDG localization. Justice is an important point that needs to be brought into the SDG gamut for it to be implemented. We talked about innovation in terms of technology like rooftop solar. So it's over to you. We can take questions. We have 5 minutes. Caron, would you like to take them, or would you like to say something?
Mrinal, just wanted to say we have a very esteemed Kanta Singh here with us, and we'd love to hear her views, her experience, her wisdom. Her outlook has been, the talk of the season for many, many years now. So I just would like Kanta ji to share her thoughts. We are working with her in different capacities. So Kanta ji, if you could just share.
Thank you very much, Kantaji, for joining us. And you are a fellow Chevener, as well as you head the UN UN division of women.
Karen, I'm in transit. I'm traveling on the road, so I don't think it'll be possible for me to speak, and people won't be able to hear it. So either I read somewhere and then I come. Let other people respond first, and I'll join.
We're just about to close the session.
I think
few words from you. Few words from you.
Look at the traffic here. I'm in the middle of a traffic situation here.
We'll have to do a separate session with you, of course. We'll do that one day, but we were very happy to have you here with us.
Let's do that.
Yeah, we do that. But a couple of comments just a couple of comments on what your take is on the SDGs, particularly related to women.
Gender, yeah.
Right. So I mean, in general, India has got to do a lot before we even start calling ourselves a middle-income country in terms of gender equality. We are far behind on many indicators. Other than, I think, MMR and education, there are many other pillars where we have to catch up with even our neighboring countries like Pakistan. Political representation is one of those, and India is doing very poorly. We all understand that. I think in the I don't know if this is the right platform to say that, but then some hope where we had platforms to engage the government, where we used to talk about the status of women in the country. I think some of those are shrinking, and that's a cause of worry. But beyond that, there are also good stories. If you look overall in India, there are women who are doing who are entering every field. I mean, I don't think there's any sector where women are not working, but they're working in a small number. Labor force participation of women is going down over a period of 10 years now. So there are many things that we need to worry about as far as women are concerned, and it's an embarrassment for the country year after year. So that's the overall story. Having said that, I'm a very hopeful person that young women are raising their voices, and it's very difficult to keep those voices low or unheard for a long time, and that gives me hope in the sense that I think things will change for women in coming years. Overall, we aren't doing great on SDG 5, to be honest. So that's my take.
That's
Thank you.
thank you. But
I'm sorry.
Back to you.
Sorry if you couldn't
Back to
hear
you,
it.
Karen.
No,
No,
Kanta,
we
that was
heard
perfect.
and
Thank you
we
very
totally
much.
agree.
Yeah. Sorry, Priya. Yeah, I was just saying thank you to Kanta.
I'm around.
Great. We'll talk. Yeah?
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Kanta, for your inputs. I think the point that you made, which is very pessimistic, that labor force participation is going down in the past 10 years of Indian women. Although it is a very pessimistic statement, but coming from such a clarity, I think it gives us the impetus and the initiative should be.
I think this, SDG 5. Sorry, I was saying SDG 5 is one of the few SDGs where we really need to worry about, because the country as a whole is using 50% of its talent pool. If you don't provide equal opportunities to the women, how do you think the country is going to go forward?
Yes.
Right. So that's the problem.
So we cannot become an emerging economy or a middle income economy, as you pointed out, without empowering women and making sure that they are participating in the labor force and making sure that they have equal opportunities and adequate opportunities to work. Very important point made by Kanta Singh over there. And thank you very much for joining in. Karen, would you like to now take some questions or add some questions over here?
Well, we're already at 4:30, so I don't know. It depends on the group itself. And, if you're okay, we can take a little bit more. But otherwise, we still have Priya to close the conversation. So I don't know. Tell me if there is someone else, any other questions?
If there are no questions, then Priya Hingorani can close the session and thank the participants.
Yeah. So before Priya closes, Priya, if you don't mind,
Please.
2 more minutes of the time. So as I spoke earlier about the ball, right, the woolen ball, I think the whole purpose of the Rise World Summit is about the SDGs. And the single message that we really want to have, and at every roundtable we repeat this, is that what I said earlier, it's not the 17, blocks that we see all the time, but it's really a woolen ball of 17 colors of, strings, which are so tightly entwined and integrated and kind of intersectional, right? Depending on whatever word you want to choose. But the fact is that it's interlinked, and therefore we need to really work with that in mind when we are doing any kind of design, planning or implementation. And we've heard this time and again from the whole group over here. One of the other things definitely is that we are trending. This is our final day. And so if any of you are planning to put something out in terms of comments, feedback, etc., please do use our hashtag. And of course, if you have a complaint or a problem, please let us know and not the world. If you want to learn more about us, because we don't really get much of time to talk, but do visit our websites and our social media. And last but not the least is we are closing. So this is the end. In fact, this is the last and final roundtable. And believe me, it is probably the best conversation we could have had, because we were talking about SDG prioritization, and it was kind of a culmination of all the various conversations we had during this last 3 days. I want to just maybe say one incident that happened in one of the roundtables, which was amazing when it came out, because the one of the experts said that even something like at least for me, it was completely unbelievable when she correlated those two things. And she said that congenital heart disease, CHD, okay, can be linked to climate action. And I was like, how? I mean, how in the world would you do that? And she said, when the temperature goes up, this affects and increases the cases. And we have Dr. Suchin Bajaj with me here, so hopefully he can reiterate that. But that's the level of interrelation between all the SDGs, and we need to really keep that in mind when we are moving forward. Last but not the least is we will take a group photograph after Priya speaks, so please don't go away. We definitely want you here. And please join us at our closing plenary, which will be at 5:30, where we will have the Glenmark Nutrition Awards first, and then at 6:30, the RISE Awards, where incidentally, Shreyas might find this a good thing, and even Priya, that a fellow Supreme Court advocate, Gopal Shankar Narayan, will be speaking over there and awarded. So do join us for that. And Philip Kotler, the father of modern marketing, will also be there among other luminaries. So look forward to have you all over there, and sign off on this. And yes, a curtain raiser that Shreya spoke about, that our theme for next year, which I'm actually supposed to be announcing it at the plenary, is really going to be about peace and justice for all. So I'm so glad that it came out of a Chevening conversation as well, to kind of share that with everybody. So thank you all very much for making this so extra special, and being part of the Chevening Alumni group, of course, makes it even more beautiful. So thank you, and Priya, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Well, you've said it all. I would just add by saying that I think it's been a very interesting 2-hour session, listening to so many interesting resources and panelists. It's been a very enlightening session, and knowledgeable as well, because one gets to learn when you're working in a particular field and you don't get too much of an opportunity to hear and listen to people from different diverse expertise fields. These kind of webinars and these kind of sessions make you learn a lot. Then Thank you very much for that. I would like to, of course, start by thanking Karen, RISE Summit, for having us partner with you and do this event. This particular session was a Chevening alumni session, which is, we have so much resource amongst our Chevening alumni, and it was great to hear all of them. Right from our Vice President Tarun, Suchin, our Secretary General, Ajit, Manu, Shreyas, Mrinal. I mean, thank you, Mrinal, for moderating and taking this forward. It's been really wonderful, great moderation. And I think it's important that as a Chevening alumni, we go out to the world and share with them the kind of international experience, the international resource that we have within India, those who have chosen to come back and those who still are in different parts of the world. As you've heard, Tarun did the opening remarks, and Tarun also how the governments of the day, whether it is UK or in India or the High Commission, they are very keen. They find that the Chevening alumni are bridges between UK and Indian governments and the people, citizens, and how we are the brand ambassadors. So it's very important for us that we continue to have these kind of associations and linkages. Thank you very much, Karen, for that. You yourself being a Chevening scholar, so it adds value. I'd like to thank all the panelists, the speakers, great inputs, and we look forward to the next round of RISE Summit. Thank you very much. And of course, congratulations to all those who put in such hard work and made this happen. Of course, we had Sundarajan, Nandita Mathur, various other speakers, Kantaji, Kumar Iyer gave his comments, Rajesh Chaturvedi. A very big thank you to all of you for being here with us. Thank you.